Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our April Expert Series call with myPath Wealth. And today is one of the most exciting calls we've run. And I would say this is probably one of the most important calls for you to listen to as business owners. This isn't a fluffy high level discussion, or sorry, this isn't like a fluffy discussion filled with pictures and buyout stuff. No, we have some very serious, heavy hitting professionals and experts here with us today, really to answer the fundamental question, which is why your business is worthless and how to make it buyer ready, even if you never plan on selling. All right. So one thing that is ridiculously important to understand is that if your business can't work without you, it's not a business. It is a job with a shelf life. And I apologize for being blunt, but that's the reality of it. And so as the timing of this is probably not the best, with Easter having just finished and Anzac Day just around the corner. We have had a lot of people say they would love to join. However, out and about on holidays with their family. It is also school holidays as well. But we are recording this. You will get a copy of the recording. And we are not going to hold back, or we're not going to slow down just because we don't have necessarily the numbers here with us today, because we know there are a lot of people who will be tuning in later on. So I'm Michael Youssef, and I'll be your panelist here today, your panel host. And with me, I've got the amazing Ivan Ang, my co-founder and our leadership expert and master alchemist. I have Greg Gerring, our C-suite continuum expert, and Steve Sandor, our exit and succession planning master. And so these guys have been around for a long time, and they are a lot smarter than I. So what better way to kind of learn than bring other people that are 10 levels higher than where I am, and what value and advice they can provide to our community. And so today the session is about turning your business into a valuable, scalable asset. That's what we're solely focused on. And you're going to hear insights from Ivan, Steve, and from Greg. And so we are going to have an opportunity for Q&A. If you do have any questions or you want to ask a question, by all means, we will have an opportunity for that. But let's just get straight into it. So I want to ask you, Ivan, what mindset shift turns a stressed operator into a strategic leader?
Yeah, this is a great one, Michael, and thank you very much for that intro, and really, really excited to be a part of this particular panel. Look, the biggest shift, I believe, is going from being a doer to becoming a designer. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you are in operator mode, you're focused on solving problems today, right? You're always looking at what's the pain, what's the issues that you're trying to solve, what's the things that you're trying to fix up on a day-by-day basis. But a strategic leader, and we'll go more into the whole aspect of leadership a little bit later, but a strategic leader is able to step back to ask, what kind of business am I building? Right? What kind of business am I building? Instead of asking, what do I need to do? They ask, who can do this instead of me? They've got that strategic mindset, in other words. And that changes, that change in thinking frees up time. It starts to build team capacity, and ultimately it increases the business value.
Yeah, 100%. Now, Greg, what's one thing business owners, I know that there's lots of things, but what do you think is the main thing that business owners forget to document, and why does it even matter?
So thank you. I appreciate the question and being invited to discuss that on this forum. Look, I actually come back with a question, which is, how many times do leaders or business owners get asked the same question over and over again by their staff? And there, right there is the answer. It's like, if you're being asked a question and you've been asked that same question twice, you should be documenting it and allowing your employees and your team to find that answer within your systems rather than coming to you. Because ultimately your business is now running on instinct rather than systems. And if you're running on instinct, it means that when you're not there, they're not going to have the answer. And immediately that just creates a situation where your business relies entirely on you, which means your valuation is all around you as a person rather than the business. And it makes it very, very hard to sell, because every person who comes and looks at your business is going to realize fairly quickly that you are the business rather than the business being the business, and the business being the asset that can be sold. So it's ultimately, have you ever been asked a question twice? Yes. Why haven't you documented that?
Yeah, wonderful. That's a really good way to put it. Just a good little framework. If you're getting asked the same question more than once, that's your turn it into a document. All right, now, Steve, what do you think is the hidden cultural cost of not preparing for an exit or succession? Irrelevant on whether you wanted to do it, but what do you think is the hidden cultural cost of not preparing for it?
Thank you, Michael. And again, I just reiterated, everybody said it's fantastic to be here. I think, if you think about the culture of an organization, what's the one thing that everybody wants to feel when they go to work? We talk about psychological safety. Really what we're talking about there is trusting each other and being able to be honest and open with each other, regardless of whether you're in a position of authority or whether you're in a position of the doing part. So I think, the cost of not getting the culture right is that it fragments, and if you don't have the right type of conversation and communication inside the organization, what happens is that people start to assume things. And gossip is the cancer of a business, and then it starts to fragment. So I would say creating what I call the trust bank. And so business owners are depositing into the trust bank continually by communicating with each of their members and understanding who that person is, both to support and care for them. And so, because at some point in time in the future, what's going to happen is that you're going to have to take a withdrawal from the bank, right? And if the first conversation that you have with someone that is a disciplinary type of conversation, if that's the first conversation that you have with that person, they're not going to trust you, because they don't, you don't know them, they don't know you. So I would say trust.
Wonderful. All right. So without further ado, let's just get straight into the core discussion that we're going to have today. But before I get into it, I will tell you a little bit about myself, and I'll take a step back, and I'll also introduce both Greg and Steve, who are with us today, just so you know that, particularly Greg and Steve, who you're listening to and who's speaking, just their background and their expertise. So me, I'm a legacy business owner. I took over our family accounting practice, which had been around for 20 years. I took that over at the end of 2016 when my dad passed away from cancer. And I have worked very hard, blood, sweat, and tears, to transform a business that ran on the back of an envelope, in terms of that's how we would write file notes, to transform a manual server-based business, which locked us into a room, into a business that could operate without me anywhere around the world. And I can successfully say I've done that. And I've seen firsthand what it looks like to be a son of someone who's sick, to experience the loss and the grief that's associated with it, to have to pick up the pieces and then figure out how to build a business that creates freedom. So I've kind of lived what myPath Wealth does on a day-to-day basis. Greg is the founder of a business called the C-Suite Continuum, and he's a consultant that specializes in the knowledge preservation and seamless business continuity within our C-suite executives, so our CEOs, CFOs, COOs. And it's all about documenting those key insights for the personnel to be able to transition out. Steve is a pioneer in human-centric wealth innovation. He's been in this game for over 40 years. He's got management and operational experience, and he's built his own proprietary frameworks, which he takes his clients through on a regular basis. And of course, you've all met Ivan. Ivan is our master coach, our master wealth alchemist. Ivan studied under the likes of John Maxwell. He was my financial planning coach when I was a financial planner, and we've maintained and kept in touch. And he has seen this firsthand in his life, and he has seen what myPath Wealth does because he was doing it for his clients when he was a financial planner. And so let's get straight into it, shall we, gentlemen? All right. So the first question, which I'll open it up to, I suppose, for all of us to discuss, what structural shifts will increase a business's valuation, even if the business owner never wants to sell? Do you want to start with that one, Ivan?
Yeah, look, I think you and I have been talking about that for a while now, and the fact is that we've been talking to a lot of small business owners, and we know how ill prepared they are for this whole discussion about succession planning. And they have to realize that there are so many different things that they need to actually get right in order for them to increase and maximize the value of the business, right? So businesses with recurring revenue, clean books, and documented processes like what Greg does, really, they're the ones who attract the higher multiples, right? So I always like to put myself in the buyer's shoes. If I was the person to go and open up my checkbook, no one has checkbook these days, but like let's talk about that figuratively, right? So if I was to open up my checkbook to buy a business, do I really want to buy a business that's messy? You know, yes, they've got revenues, but the books are not clean. There's a whole mix of personal and business expenses and a whole heap of different things that you just can't work out. Or you know, do I want to actually buy something that's so key person dependent on that owner? And the sad answer, the fact of the matter is that I'd say no, right? So those are the things that we really need to look at in terms of what what really will attract a buyer to open up that checkbook, and not only that like write a significant amount on that check, and it could be the difference between one extra zero at the end of that number. All right, and that could make the difference between 100,000 and $1 million. 10 million versus 1 million. I mean, those are real big issues, right? So what do you think, Steve?
I want to slip it. I agree with all of that. And it's funny, we've been talking about this for 30 years. Business owners have been, encouraged to get out of their own way, work on their business, not in it. And for whatever reason, there has been a reluctance in the business community to let go of or think in that different mindset. And that's why I want to bring it back to the mindset. If we're talking about a structural change, I think the mindset of the business owner to understand that their role in the organization is a strategic role. And, we've all been at some point in time, been involved in corporate in a sense. And when you're a divisional manager or a general manager or, something in a senior executive position, 70% of your day is strategic. And yet a business owner who might have the same size portfolio as I might have as a general manager, $5 million revenue, etc., it's almost the reverse. 30% strategic, 70% doing. So I think there's that mind shift. And I want to make the point that, something like in Queensland, at least 400,000 businesses are going to be sold over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, not all of them are able to be sold. Now, some of them are income driven. But that silver tsunami, right? That the people who are going to buy that business, it's supply and demand, are the next generation, the Generation Ys and the millennials, and they look at business completely different. So you're not selling a business that you like. Treat it like a product that you're selling in the marketplace. And who's the buyer going to be? The buyer is going to be someone who wants lifestyle. They don't want a job. And so that's where I would, that's where I would get, that's at least what I, when I'm talking to the people that I'm working with, it's like, don't think of your business as something that you want to, that you want to run. It's who's going to buy it. And that then provides that what you're talking about is accelerating the value of the business.
What about you, Greg? What's your thoughts on those kind of structural shifts that will increase valuation?
Well, it's something I'd like to follow up on just what Steve said. When you think about when you sell a product to a customer, and it doesn't matter whether you're Coles selling a product to a customer or whether you're any other kind of business, you're selling a discrete product that the person takes away and does with what it is that whatever they want to do with it. They don't need, and if they need a little bit of information about how to use that product, typically there will be a little manual inside the box that explains how to them. So if you just apply that on a much bigger scale to your business, you want to provide a manual to the new owner to run the business. So it's as simple as that. And one of the things that's most interesting to me, and I've been involved in the purchase of or the sale of a number of businesses over the years, every time somebody wants to buy a business, they want to have inside of the contract a requirement for the old owner to remain there for 6 months, a year, 18 months. And without fail, in every scenario, that owner doesn't stay for the 6 months, 1 year, or 18 months. They exit early. And they give up the money that, there's extra money in it for them. And they often give up the money because they've mentally left the building. They don't want to be involved any longer. And the new owner desperately wants them to remain because they don't know how to run the business because there isn't a manual. And it's an incredibly simplistic way to describe it, a manual, right? It's way more detailed than that and nuanced than that. But it's the same stuff. It's how do I use this product, business, whatever, properly? And how do I make it work the best for me? And no one knows how to do that except and to a certain extent, the existing owner. I mean, maybe it's a failing business and you're buying a failing business and you think you can pick it up. But ultimately, when it comes down to something, this is something I experienced a while back, something very simple. A business owner was exiting and a new person came to me and asked me the question, how do I ensure this business will run properly? And they were essentially a business a bit like they were hiring out machinery. And I said, what happens if one of your pieces of machinery breaks down? Do you, as the new owner, know where to get that fixed? And they said no. And I said, well, there's a question that you need to ask. Where do I go to get this piece of machinery fixed so that I can hire it out tomorrow? And it's the little things. It's pieces of implicit and knowledge that are in people's heads that you just don't know what to do with. So that's my answer to that scenario.
We're going to have to come back because and do one of these again, guys, because each one of these questions is probably, we could go into a nice good hour on every one of these questions that are coming up, because I mean, we are touching the surface and trying to get into the key points to answer these questions, but there are a lot of nuances and there's a lot of different circumstances, and it does change how we play the game a little bit. It's just, my point is something I was on a call presenting to e-com founders, and one of the things that I suggested is every business owner should be evolving their thinking to think like an investor. And what that means is, if I'm Warren Buffett and I am looking at what stock to pick, it's a different way of thinking to how business owners think. And I think that's a really powerful structural thing to think of, is remove yourself as the owner and actually think as an investor. And I feel for a lot of small business owners, it's almost the missing link in their thinking. And that kind of ties into my next question, which is all around reducing reliance when the founder is still the rainmaker or lead operator. I don't think you can ever reduce the reliance on the founder if they're the primary person, if the founder is not thinking of their business as an asset and they're not thinking of themselves as the investor in said asset. You reckon, Greg?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, absolutely. The problem with in many respects, a problem with consultants like us, and I'm sorry I'm going to dump all of us into that same bucket, is we use big phrases like, think strategically, or codify your business, or document your systems. And business owners, as we all know, are flat out running their business, keeping the wheels turning, getting the sales in the door. And big ideas are really, really hard to implement. So one of the things I like to help people with in this area of reducing reliance on the owner is, I'll give you a couple of examples. Bring in a family member, a colleague, somebody not involved in the day-to-day of the business. Sit them down and give them a simple challenge. If an employee came to you with a problem, how would you respond? If a supplier asked you for a copy of your terms and conditions, could you find it? This is somebody not involved in the business on the day-to-day. And what you'll quickly realize is that they can't answer that question. And it's not because that person's not a capable individual. It's because the business, I used this phrase earlier, the business is running on instinct. So there's a whole lot of knowledge in your head, there's a whole lot of knowledge in your key employees' heads that is just sitting there. And if they got hit by a bus tomorrow, you would have a problem because you're not systemized. And again, that's the big phrase. You're not systemized. How do I go about systemizing? So start small. Simple things. Create a consistent file naming protocol within your business. So every single Word document, Excel spreadsheet, PDF document, PowerPoint presentation is named in a very consistent way, so that when you need to search your entire Z drive that has 20 years worth of files, you'll be able to find the file you need quickly because you have a file naming structure, and every single file is named that way. Really, that's a very simple thing to implement straight away into a business. Similarly with folder structures in your business, label things really, really well so that they can be found very quickly. There's an immediate way that you can have an impact on your business. Yes, it's not going to have a 10 times multiple of valuation of the business. But what does happen is when a person you're trying to sell the business who comes in and asks you a question and asks your staff members a question, where is X? Staff member goes, oh, it's there, straight away. As opposed to, I don't know, I'll have to ask somebody else. And owners potential buyers get very worried when staff members can't find things and can't answer questions. And the next simple example I'll give you is when you're asked a question, and again, I said this earlier, if you ask something twice, ask yourself, why did the staff member come to me to answer that question? Was I the source of truth? And importantly, is the answer documented somewhere? And typically it's not. So you have two things going wrong. One, you haven't got a go-to place for answers. And two, you've made it too easy for people to rely on you because they ask you a question and you don't say, I've answered this before. You know where the answer is. We talked about this previously. It's been documented. And you have to push your staff back a little bit to say, if I'm answering this for the first time, no problem, but I'm not answering it twice. And staff, like water, will find the path of least resistance. And the easiest path is to go to you, the owner, and say, how do I do X? And you need to stop that. You need to flip it. You need to find ways to flip that. I mean, that's an incredibly simple, small thing that you can start to do rather than me saying to somebody, go and document your entire business. And that's very hard to do. So,
Greg, it goes back to something that Steve said before, which I absolutely love. There's a mindset shift there that's required, isn't there, Steve? In terms of you got these guys who are entrepreneurs, and we love entrepreneurs because they think creatively. But the thing is that once they actually get stuck into this business or this running of a business, they don't have the ability to switch. Okay, say how do I stop being the doer and start making sure that I've got those systems and things in place. But one thing that I want to actually pick up on is that I think it goes to another level. I think the thing is that with technology today, with all the, we're all on technology, we're all on laptops and iPads and whatever phones at this present moment. The problem that I'm finding is that a lot of these small business owners, even if they do have some of this stuff documented, it's hiding on their local drive, on their laptop somewhere that no one can break into because of multi-factor authentication these days. And so, there's all this stuff, be it legal agreements, financial statements, or, processes and policies and whatnot. They're stuck somewhere. They're not in a central drive or a central place or vault that we have at myPath Wealth that can actually provide them with an ability to pass that on to the next person. So, but what do you think, Steve, in terms of the mindset shift side of things? So you're the expert in this area, and
yeah, I think Michael's right. I think we need about 8 sessions to cover all of everything, because it is, it is. I mean, as I say, business is simple, but it's complex, or it's easy but not simple, or whatever the saying is. Right? That was a senior's moment right there. But I want to pick up on. I mean, there's so many threads that you could pull on here, right? I think a lot of the issue that I experience with business owners when I'm faced with, helping them through this problem, is that they're continually being told you need to let go of control, right? And I think that's bunkum. You're the business owner. You are accountable for everything. If when I was in a general management position, if someone said you need to let go of control, right? What? No, I'm not going to do that. You can be less controlling. I think there's a difference between being in control and the leader of the organization and setting directions and allowing people within your organization, to Greg's point, it's like if someone asks me the question twice, something's not right. The best book or one of the classic books is Ken Blanchard, the 1 minute manager met the monkey. And with, I used to do this with my staff. I say, here's the book, read it, and then don't come into my office expecting the monkey to jump off your back onto mine, because it's never going to happen. Right. And so we built, this is the language and communication that we had internally, so that when they came in, I said, the monkey's not jumping onto my back. They automatically knew that they had to go and solve the problem, and I would be there to help them to do that. Right. So I think, being in control is don't let go of control, but be less controlling. I think there's also a psychological, as you said, these business owners are entrepreneurs, very creative. The most successful ones I've ever worked with are the lazy entrepreneurs. And I don't mean lazy in that they're not prepared to work, is that they're lazy and they only do the things that they're really good at, and they're happy to delegate and pay people well to do the things that they know will add value, right? I'm happy to pay you $1 because I'm expecting $3 in return, right? And when that's that mind shift of, I don't have to do this myself. So yeah, I just as a side point, I love Greg's. I'm a systems Nazi. Can you use that word these days? I'm not sure. Sorry, edit that out, Michael. But the protocols in naming. I mean, you can tag now with with the systems, and you can have the protocol, but you can also have tagging systems, so that if you're looking for something, you know exactly where it is. So yeah, I'm all in on that. I love that part of it. But yeah, so bit of a rambling answer, but that's where I'm at.
It's interesting because it's like you said, business is complicated, but it's simple in a sense as well. And something as simple as a naming convention and folder hierarchy and structure, I look and I go, that's common sense. Every time I start a business, there's always ask Ivan how anal I am about organizing all the folders and all the templates and how it all looks. And if it's messy, I freak out. My OCD hates it. But I find it creates a structure that makes it really easy. Ivan knows, okay, if I do this, I put it in this folder. If I don't put it in this folder, Michael's going to probably tell me off. But it creates consistency, and that makes, and not something simple, but it makes it easy. Even, creating, I know we've talked in myPath Wealth, we've talked about SOPs a lot, and we've talked about how technology makes it super easy now to create SOPs, like operating procedures, your operating manuals. It's a simple matter of just, for us, it's recording yourself on screen and then generating a transcript and turning that into steps. And if you're a pizza shop, you can get a bunch of different cameras and record yourself making a pizza and talking through it. So there's different ways to do this, to do these things that have a massive impact. Don't you guys agree? These simple little things that, all right, they take time, but doing this, doesn't it increase your valuation multiple and cut your own dependency all at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it does.
Can I just jump in? Because we're talking about, operating procedures, systems and processes. There are people who, when you speak like that, they get, visceral, they get chills, and, they can only run for the hills because this is just the last thing that I want to be involved in. So I think it requires an understanding of the individuals within the organization and whether they have that leaning towards, systems and processes and detail, and whether they are creative and the ability to think alternatively. So again, it's, when we're talking about structural within the organization, sometimes you've got the wrong person sitting in the wrong seat doing the wrong job, and you're expecting them to behave in a particular way. So I think there is, and that takes us down a completely different rabbit hole. But I think there is a need to be able to make sure that the people who you've got employed who are looking after a function, that they're best suited to look after that function. And if they're not, then reallocate them over a period of time into an area where they're more effective and they're more, enjoyable. They like coming to work because they like doing what they're doing, right? So
Well, Steve, even just reconsidering your hiring processes, because the thing is, I find that a lot of small business owners, they focus so much time, energy, and effort on hiring just business developers, and a lot of these business developers are those who have that visceral reaction to, systems and processes, because they're people. They like getting out there, developing business, right?
Yep.
But the focus is not so much on how to clean up, what I call corporate hygiene, basically just having stuff organized so that, someone else understand what's happening. All right. These guys are great at what they do, but if you have an overload or an excessive weighting towards these people in your team, and you don't have enough, people who can actually do the stuff that Greg is talking about, or you're talking about, or I'm talking about, and that then creates an imbalance in the team, right? And that's where there's major, you and I have both seen it, well, we've all seen it, that creates major trust issues internally, because you're kind of waiting for someone else to do what they're meant to be doing, but they don't. And someone else has to pick up the pieces, and that's never good. And coming back to Michael's point, if you put yourself as in the shoes as an investor, and you can see that from day one walking in through the doors, you're not going to have that nice warm fuzzy feeling to open up that checkbook.
Yeah. And so with that, we can go, we've started to touch on this, but a lot of the things that we've talked on do answer this question, which is, what have you guys seen which are the biggest mistakes that destroy a business's value? And I want to ask you in particular a question, Steve, because I say this a lot. Every accountant, solicitor talks about a due diligence process. It's the standard language that we use when we're looking at business acquisitions and things like that. But I want to flip it a little bit. How does a due diligence mindset impact, and how can not having that due diligence mindset destroy your business's value?
Any business broker, anyone who's been in the banking world, there is a document that you need to tick off for that, for that transaction to occur. We all know that. And so this due diligence mindset, it sort of wraps around everything that we've been speaking about, right? So as a business owner, thinking about what your due diligence should be in terms of, it's basically your marketing of your business. So here, what's the document that you can put into the marketplace that people will then start to go, okay, well, this business is worth this, or it's not worth that. If you don't have a document, and this goes to, Greg's point, absolutely. If you don't have those standard operating procedures and all of that documented, then the brokers that I'm talking to are not even listing the product, not even listing the business, because they're going to say, it's going to sit on the shelf for 12 months. We're just not going to be able to sell it because no one's going to be interested. No one's going to, because there's nothing there other than the balance sheet and the profit and loss and maybe a customer register, right? That's it. Well, that's not a due diligence process. So I think, thinking through, taking everything that we've spoken about and listing these down in terms of, these are the things that I'm going to need to cover. And I've got time, right? The biggest issue with succession planning or exit strategy is that they rush to the end, right? It's all, I've got to sell this business in 3 months' time because my wife's got cancer, right? Or I've got cancer, or I've hit my retirement goals. I want to hit my retirement goals, whatever the situation is. My parents are ill, like in your situation, Michael. So, they get to the point where, and then they're starting to make decisions that are stressed decisions. And we all know that when we're in those situations, we make poor decisions because we're now being forced into something. So start early. That's start planning now. Yeah. Even though you don't intend to sell. And that's the due diligence process. Go through whatever that due diligence process is for you. It doesn't have to be massive. You can start one step at a time, right?
What about you, Greg? What have you seen in your work that can massively and quickly destroy a business's value?
Well, I mean, the numbers, the things that I've come across are significant. Probably, well, again, I'd like to focus on quite easy ones for people to have easy wins. So I remember not all that long ago being involved in the purchase of a business, and we walked in the door to do the due diligence, and we had, as Steve just referred to, a checklist, and we started to ask questions. And one of the first questions we asked was, okay, can you show us your employment contracts with your employees? And they looked at us blankly and went, and straight away, that was like, we immediately took the price, let's call it 2 mil, and just took 100 grand off for every employee that didn't have an employment contract. Straight away, just bang, 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 bang. We went, your price is now, they had 5 employees, your price is now 1.5 mil. Because you don't have employment contracts, so they could walk anytime. There's nothing stopping them walking. Similar example, and it's just on the other side of the business. Do you have supply contracts with your suppliers? You've been telling us in your sales document that you have exclusivity from so-and-so company in Japan to supply you with product. You have exclusivity in Australia. Show me the contract. Oh, no, we don't have one of those. It's verbal. $100,000 off the price. There you go. So I like to use very simple examples. Those are killers straight away because you just reduce your price straight away.
What about messy financials? How much, if you were to ask a question around, have you got a good P&L and a balance sheet, tax returns up to date, ATO debt under control, and let's say they handed you spreadsheets and an ATO portal report that shows that they're on the cusp of a knock at the door by the ATO saying we're going to start liquid. What happens to that 1.5 mil now?
Yeah. Oh, look, obviously, you're a financial guy. I'm not. But I'll give you another thing that will help business owners dramatically. Although if they're looking to exit, maybe this is a big call. But doing something like the company directors course, you know, you own a business. You're a director of the business. You may not be a listed entity. Okay, you know, I understand. But you, as a director, you still you can't be functioning when insolvent. You know, these things are illegal to do. If you don't know how to read a balance sheet and you're relying on your accountant to do it for you, and don't want to point fingers at accountants necessarily, but if you're relying on other people to tell you about your finances of your own business because you don't know how to read a balance sheet, you haven't got your cash flow planned out for the next 6 to 12 months, you know, yes, the cash flow is a bit like going, which way is the wind blowing? You can't predict perfectly, but ultimately, if you don't have a level of planning forward that will show what things are going to look like, what's our cash flow going to be, you know, what are our expenses going to be, we're going to run out of cash in this month unless X, Y, and Z happens, your business valuation is a disaster straight away. Agreed.
And so, Steve, what about culture? And this is kind of leadership, like leading into the next question as well. But what about culture? How quickly can that kill a business's value or the lack thereof?
Yeah, I think a business that relies on the business owner to set the culture, and it's not a part of the business DNA. It's very superficial, and so what's the new culture? What's the new business owner going to do when they come in? Are they going to change the culture? Do they need to change the culture of the business? Because there isn't one, right? And who in the organization is going to be the saboteur because they're not bought into this new culture? No one likes change. No one likes it. Right. So you have to be very subtle about the worst thing I can do as a business advisor when I go into a new business is come in with great ideas that we're going to change everything. Right. Total killer, because they don't trust me. I actually have to understand the nuances of the business to know what needs to be changed and what doesn't need to be changed. So that's the culture within the organization. And that it goes back to, Ivan's point about, people within the organization. Well, I think everybody's been making this point, but within the organization, they need to be accountable for what they're doing. And if they're accountable for what they're doing, and I talk about playing in the sandbox, right? You're given a sandbox to play in. You've got a job description. Everybody rolls their eyes when I say that, but you've got a job description that describes what you're accountable for. And it's not a tool to bash you over the head with. It's a tool for the leaders within the organization to know when that person needs support and when they need encouragement and whether they need to be upskill, their knowledge or experience or whatever. Right. So without all of that, and that's leadership. And I don't know that many business owners, particularly the ones who are the entrepreneurial one, they're out in front. I will often joke with the people that I'm working with. I say, when you come in with your brilliant idea, really what you're doing is you're throwing a hand grenade over the fence into friendly fire, right? And someone needs to jump on that hand grenade before it blows everybody else up. So, please don't do that. Please don't come in and kill what we're trying to build here with all these great ideas. And that's but there's that tension, right? If I don't have those great ideas and I don't have somebody holding me back on that, then either it's going to be a runaway train or nothing's going to happen. And that's the culture of the organization. And so it needs open and honest communication within that. And that takes time to embed within the organization. Yeah. All of these pillars are important, right? And if you pull away the culture stool and you pull away the wealth or the profit stool or the systems and processes, the table falls over. You actually have to have all of those in, and that's the quality of a leader.
And so, with that said, then, Ivan, this one's for you. How do we build a leadership team where everyone is in the right seat on the bus? So everyone is in the right seat, so they're doing what they should be doing. But that leadership team can also step up without the chaos.
Yeah. So a couple of things to catch what Steve and as well as Greg has been saying. One of the things there, being on the right seat, it means that you know why you're there in the first place, right? So that means that role description, that job description, you know what you're meant to be doing first and foremost, and you know how you're adding to the organization, the business. Okay. Now, the other aspect is that coming back to something else that we mentioned before, which is the whole cultural piece, is that I'm a firm believer that culture is more caught than taught. Okay. So it's way too late when you have an exiting leader, like what the guys have been saying before. If you don't have the time to pass on that culture, it's going to be a big issue for your business and as well as the value of your business. So if your team culture walks out with you as the leader, you've missed that transfer opportunity, and that's a huge issue for a lot of small businesses that we see. Big business, they tend to do it a little bit better. I wouldn't say that they're great at it, but in small business, it's exacerbated. It's the effect is amplified in many ways. So leadership transition is a major issue for a lot of small business owners. They don't think about it anywhere near early enough. So I think about it from the point of view that if you're not going to be in your business, if you took 3 months away from your business and you came back, what's it going to look like, right? And if you can't put your hand on your heart and say that you can actually walk away for 3 months and come back and know that everything is still going to be operational and everyone's going to be happy, there's major issues that you need to actually work on and face, and face up to. So that's got to do with culture. That's got to do with leadership. I believe that one aspect of what leadership transition that's being underdone at the moment is the ability for us to have really great mentors in the business that knows how to tell stories, that know how to embed values, not just read handbooks and just give people manuals. Yes, we need all those. We've been talking about it all day, right? We need all those policies, SOPs, and procedures. But a lot of times it's the mentoring that goes along with it that really gives it the flavor, that enhances the culture, that really makes it that much more effective. Because I can tell you, do you remember when you're going through school and you know which are the teachers that you like and which are the ones that you don't like, right? That's the same. The thing is that if you're not going to listen to the ones that you don't like. In fact, the thing is you switch off immediately as soon as they say anything, right? But the ones that you really like and the ones that you actually have trust with over an extended period of time, and they've built that credibility, that reliability, that intimacy. There's the whole trust equation that I won't go into now. But they come from building life and building relationship, and as well as telling you stories, to giving you good examples, giving you the things that you need to actually learn along the way with that journey. That's really important. So leadership development is not just about skills; it's about having that confidence, that clarity in your roles. But that comes from mentoring, that comes from coaching. There's a big difference between mentoring and coaching, but I'm not going to get into that today as well. But yeah, it's very, very important. But one last thing that I want to actually pick up on is the lack of time. And I think Greg mentioned it before. The problem that I see a lot, and this is one of the valuation killers that I didn't mention earlier. The one thing that I see that a lot of small business owners don't give themselves anywhere near enough of is time. They don't give themselves enough time to do these things, which has a huge impact on the valuation, because guess what? The buyers can see the desperation. The buyers can sense how desperate you are to get out of the business, and they will play on that. They will say, hey, you really need to pay, you really need to get out by this particular date. So, let's drag it out a little bit further. And then they start to say, okay, look, no, let's take a lower offer just to get out quicker. We don't want that, right? We want you to have the ability to maximize the value of your business, and that means that you need to actually have the time to be able to do that.
That's awesome. And so, with that said, what I want to get each of you to share your top 3, and I want each of you to share what are the top 3 things, simple or complex, but your key 3 things that business owners can do from today to buy back their time and freedom, whether they want to sell it or not. You want to start, Steve?
Yep. So get good at delegating. That's I think really understanding. It sort of goes along lines with what Ivan was saying in terms of mentoring. Get really good at being the person who cares about your staff and delegate to that. And everybody's going to roll their eyes on this one, but really get clear on job descriptions, but don't use it as a compliance tool. Use it as a mechanism to know whether you're supporting the person who is in your charge to be able to support them in the job that they're doing. So that's sort of a little bit like mentoring, right? But you have a document that you're able to help them to make sure that they're meeting the tasks or the job or the performance levels that you're expecting of them. The final thing would be spending time with your people around the culture. And not surprisingly, they all sort of fit around culture, because that's where I feel that when you get the culture right within the organization, all of these other things, they're necessary. Right, I focus as much on culture as I do on standard operating procedures. But I think if your culture's right, so spend time, create the trust bank that I spoke about earlier, invest in the time, make deposits into that, so that the person who you are going to deal with when there is going to be the shit hits the fan and they've not behaved the way that you thought they were going to behave, that you can have an open and honest conversation with them, and they trust you to know that you're doing that to support them, not to hit them over the back of the head. They would be my 3.
What about you, Greg?
Look, I'm going to build on things that we've all talked about. When Steve talks about culture, and I see quite a big difference in culture between, let's say, Australian businesses and American businesses, as an example. We have in Australia, we tend to have a culture of withholding, and American businesses seem to have a culture of sharing. So that's a huge part of it. People in Australia seem to be very scared of sharing their knowledge and information because they think they'll be made redundant. And oddly enough, I'm now going to follow that exact phrase with building redundancy into your business, because if you're the only one who knows how to do something, you need to build redundancy in by having a second person who knows how to do it and a third person who knows how to do it. So delegation of, again, I said rather very early on, we all talk about these big phrases. Delegation sounds really scary. Try and delegate 2 core decision points to somebody else in your business. And then, and this is the big key point, test that. Test whether that works. Create a scenario whereby that decision point has to be hit by someone and it's not you, and see if the delegation has worked. Because if it's worked, you've made an appreciable difference to your business. Don't answer it, document it.
Very cool.
Simple.
Ivan?
I'm going to get real practical here. Firstly, identify your 2IC. If you don't have someone that you can actually trust to step into your role, and everything is not going to go to bits if you do take that 3 months off, then you've got problems. So identify that 2IC who's going to be able to help you keep on keeping on, right? Firstly. The second thing, the most practical thing that I can think of is block out what I call CEO time in your diary, right? I want you to make sure that you have identified time in your diary where you're going to be working on the business and not in the business. And yeah, that's an overused term, but the practicalities is that people know that they need to do that, but they don't give themselves enough time. They don't actually block out time in their diaries on a week in, week out basis to be able to do that. And it could be doing things like mentoring, could be strategic thinking, could be systems review. It could be a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about today, but you need that time to be able to do it. The last thing that I think is absolutely critically important is have that conversation with your family. Right. Michael and I had started this business because we see the impact on families. We see the impact that small businesses, when they first get formulated or they first get started, there's all these great intentions in terms of it providing freedom, providing control, provide good income and revenue and so on and so forth. And at some stage, you've promised the world to your significant other that, honey, I'm going to sell it for like $5 million and we're going to go selling around the world. And it doesn't happen. And that destroys families. All right. Because it destroys the ability for you to actually effectively transfer wealth in a well thought through manner that's going to make a significant difference, not just to you, not just to your loved ones, not just to your kids, but for generations to come, and as well as for the community that you want to make a big difference to. So unless you're going to have that discussion with your whole entire family, and especially if you have adult kids, bring them into a family, what Michael and I call a family council meeting. Unless you're going to have those type of discussions, frank and open discussions, it's all, people are in assumption land. They're in la land in terms of thinking, oh, dad's going to do this, or mum's going to, the founder, you being the founder of the business, be it a mum or dad, you're going to sell it for $5 million, and they're just going to go on their merry way, expecting that, this is going to happen at some stage. And it doesn't, and it kills families because there's no discussion. There's no open and honest discussions, good and bad, by the way, right? People just want to know. Okay, so those are the things that I think that, we get deep down and practical. Those are the things that I would suggest people do.
That's a lot of really awesome, practical, applicable things that every one of us can take and apply into our own businesses right now. So there's nothing stopping us from taking an action from today and working on that action and having something documented, something shifting by the end of today. So I'll throw it over to anybody that's here with us. Does anybody have any questions, anything they want to add, something that didn't make sense?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for this. This has been incredible. Not just for, I suppose, long-term illnesses. I think in my case, even just things like wanting to take leave, like go on a small holiday for a week or two with your family, and what that actually means when you're gone. The question I had, so before I started my business, I was senior exec, so similar to what Steve sort of described, where everything was heavily processed, procedures were followed. I worked in banking, so you can appreciate how stringent kind of was. Coming into, I suppose, a smaller business where you are the sole person that is responsible for all those things, what is your level of, I suppose, how far do you embed it? Do you get what I'm saying? Because you can go to the point of over processing and over documenting every step versus that kind of, I suppose, sweet spot, if you know what I'm saying. Because I am a very big believer of, obviously there's huge time investment to get your business to that point where everything is documented, but the capacity of your time gets released later once you've handed that over, right? So I get all that, but what point do you, I suppose, sorry, I'll start again. In terms of a risk alleviation, what are your key things? Is there any tools, systems, anything like that? I know you mentioned the file naming conventions and things like that, but what other tools do you suggest or have used in the past that have really worked for you in terms of both structuring up in that quick sort of way that allows you to release that capacity?
Well, that's a really good question. I'll answer the first bit, which is what's the sweet spot, and I tend to default to the 80-20 rule, Pareto's rule, when I think about things like this, which is, the last 20%, trying to document the last 20% of what it is that makes your business run will take you 80% of the time, because those last 20% of things, firstly, they don't create a lot of value within your business. Typically, it's the first 80% of things that are going to do a lot. So if you've documented 80% of the things, I think you're doing very, very well in comparison to the vast majority of businesses. So that tends to be a bit of a sweet spot. And, sure, it can be 70-30 or it could be 90-10, but ultimately you'll find that you'll get to a point where it's no longer of particular value to keep documenting things, because, and this I suppose is the key, what are the things that remain the same within your business and what are the things that change? And the things that change relatively frequently are not worth documenting. And it's the things that are the same and have been the same for 10 and 15 years that are absolutely worth documenting, because when you bring a new person to the business, they don't know those things that have happened for the last 10 or 15 years. But if they can go and find it and it's exactly the same as it was 15 years ago and they can just do it that way, that helps dramatically. So that's the first thing. As to what an easy way of going about this, it kind of depends on your business. For me, I find I go into businesses and I've got a set of 15 or 20 tools that I use to help businesses. And it really depends on the business and the type of business and what they're doing as to which one is, it's like the low-hanging fruit. Where are the easy wins? Where can we do some small things that'll make big differences? I like what Steve said with regard to job descriptions, because what I find with job descriptions is most job descriptions are 8 years old. They've been in the top drawer. They haven't changed. And if you ask the employee to rewrite their job description, it won't work, because they deem everything that they do to be obvious. So they don't. And a best example I can give you is maybe a job description says monthly reporting to management. Now, they know what that means because they've been doing it for 6 years. The new person does not know what the monthly report looks like, where they go for the data, how they manipulate the data in order to make it into a report that management want. So there's a little bit of documentation that goes to how do you do your monthly report. And if you go to your employee and say, can you document that exact process, they'll do it. If you ask them the big picture of rewrite your job description, they'll never do it. So it's asking small questions that incrementally will make a big difference. That's my best advice.
Gana, is it okay if I ask two real quick questions? How long have you been in business and what's the plan? Are you looking at scaling up or and growing?
For myself personally, so I've been in business for 5 years. I recently had a structural change in that my business partner exited the business in August last year. I'm now in a position where I've rebuilt the business. I was going through a fair bit at the time of her departure. So I've restructured the business. I'm now in the process of, I basically want to look at what the next 2 to 5 years look like. So I supply into grocery stores. So my scale can get really big really quickly.
Right.
But it's my issue, and this is where Michael's been amazing, is helping us with cash flow and account management, that sort of stuff. But that's why the reason I ask is because at the moment, when there's two of you, it's fine, because if one person goes on leave or something happens, you've always got that secondary person. But now I'm the sole person with some great staff, but no one works full time, which is why this is really important for me, in the sense that if something were to happen, or kids get sick or something like that, I have what they need in place. It goes back to your point about trust, that they have what they need and they're not feeling like I'm coming into work, I have no idea what I'm doing, and therefore I'm stressed out, I don't want to be here. And I don't want to be on the flip side of that, of saying, I'm not there. Do they know what they're doing?
How many staff do you have?
I have 3.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of, for me, it depends, right? I think you can over-engineer things easily, as to Greg's point, 80-20. I think what I always tell people who are sort of in your situation is start with the structure. Even though your hat is in each of the boxes, what role does the marketing person have in your organization? What does the salesperson do? What does the operation person do? What does the finance do? What does the IT person do? And so you don't need to go into a lot of detail, but that's as you're spending time in your day, you put this hat on and then you take that hat on. So you need, and it goes back to Greg's point, have a job description. The monthly reporting, the SOP is the monthly reporting, and that can be 3 bullet points. Go here, go here. The only reason large organizations need a lot of bureaucracy is the further away from the nucleus the information gets, the more distilled the answer becomes. Send reinforcements, we're going to advance, ends up send 3 and 4 pence, we're going to a dance. So you end up with this message distilling, and people interpret it however they want to do it. That's the value of the standard operating procedures. So and if your focus is on marketing, well, then you build the processes inside the marketing department so that it runs effectively. If sales is the area of your focus, then you put functions in place that automate some of those functions. I use Zoho as a CRM, for example. It's my VA, basically. Everything that I do is inside that. All the tasks that I do, the projects that I'm running and all that sort of stuff. So I'm a bit rambling today, but I'm hoping that, build the systems that are applicable for the stage that you're in, but think about what the business is going to be in 3 to 5 years' time, and set that foundation so that it can scale into that. And then obviously, as you bring people on, you'll be able to delegate all of that. Does that help you?
That was great. Thank you, both of you. That was wonderful. Thanks, guys.
I think Ivan wants to chime in as well.
Yeah, God, I just wanted to just quickly have I pronounced your name properly?
Yes, you have. Perfect, actually.
God, I just wanted to ask you very quickly, how much are you using in terms of AI in your business at this present moment?
AI, not so much. I do use at the moment. I've got a system called Unleashed, which manages all my inventory, batch tracking, all my work orders, all that sort of stuff. And I use ProspectSoft as my sales CRM.
Okay.
But in terms of AI, not yet. No.
Yeah. So I'm going to flip it a little bit. The thing is, I don't want to get too over technical because I'm not the expert in this space, but I just know that I come from an L&D space. So I know that when it comes to you creating the right training for people to be able to step in, it requires you to have the right mindset. And I think that if you use AI to ask you the right questions as to why you do things the way that you do things, and then get it to create like a facilitator's guide, or an instructional guide for you, that makes life a whole lot easier. And it could be even as simple as, and Michael mentioned it at the very, very beginning, just recording a video of how you do certain things, and then put into a software that develops a transcript, that turns it into instructional guides and so on and so forth. And just make use of stuff. Technology is just amazing these days as to what you can do in that respect. But one thing that I actually want to make sure that you do is to use technology to ask you the right questions rather than you just telling it. I want you to make sure that you are getting it to challenge you. So use really good prompts like, apply the 6 whys, or the strategic thinking hats and stuff like that to how you do certain things. And the more questions they ask you, the more they actually are building into the background in terms of things that are going to be of value and that's important to you, that goes into that that Pareto rule in terms of what is 80%, 80-20, that's going to be the most valuable things for you to actually think about and record and pass on.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I know we're very close to the end. Just to that point, the hack that I've just learnt with AI is that you ask it to give you the prompt.
Yeah.
So you actually
that.
So here's
here's the context.
Here's the context. Now give me the prompt that would work for you, and the three, I'm going to use Seth Godin's style. So ask me questions about that. I've just built a whole series of workshops using that methodology. So it's going to take over. I mean, we'll be sitting here and we'll have avatars that will be talking for us, and we'll be sitting drinking pina colada somewhere.
I did something pretty cool with Notebook LM the other day with this little audio podcast style thing. But something we're going through an exercise very much at this present moment within HY accounting. And funnily enough, the timeliness of this event is amazing given the work that I've been doing, or maybe the work that I've been doing at HY accounting is a consequence of all the stuff that I've been talking about at within myPath Wealth. I still remember sitting in this office like this, crying 7 years ago because I had no bloody idea how I was going to take Dad's business and build on it. What I didn't realize was everything that we had talked about today, I didn't have a language for it. I didn't have the technical terms for it, but I was building it. I put the right people in, got the people to tell me what processes to build, use the technology, document the process. One thing I've noticed, and I'm an idiot, you can say. And one thing I've learned from my mentors is the smartest thing you can do is become the dumbest person in your team. And I take that. I used to get anxious about it, but I now take it with pride. And so one thing I look at my business and I say, are we getting from A to B? Yes. And I know we're getting from A to B because people are coming more than they're leaving, and they're staying for longer, and everyone's happy and the business is growing. But when I pull the engine, when I lift the bonnet and I take a look at the engine, is the engine running efficiently? Now, I know the engine is working because the business is moving, but can it be more efficient? So one of the big exercises that we've been going through over the last few weeks is basically reviewing how the engine works. And in our kind of business model, it's a bit hard because you have accounting principles in a sense, like these are the steps, but then you have client nuances that kind of ultimately dictate. And, you could have all these steps, but the client situation drives the steps at the end result. But something that we've been doing, Gada, is we've literally, all of us as a team have sat in a Teams meeting and done a workshop where everyone in the team presents how they do a piece of work. How do you do a BAS? How do you do a BAS? How do you do the financials? How do you do bookkeeping? We've recorded everything. So we've got this, 15-page recording on how we do bookkeeping. And what I've been doing is collecting all those recordings, going through every one of our videos that we've recorded, generating transcripts. Transcripts are so much more valuable than they've ever used to be, in my opinion now. Transcripts are like the most important thing you can get, because I plan on taking all of those transcripts, throwing it into ChatGPT. And, one of the things that I had in the back of my mind, and Greg, you answered it for me, is how far do I go? And now knowing that I only have to hit 80%, means that I can throw in my transcripts into ChatGPT and challenge it, the 6 whys, ask me questions, everything like that. And I will get it to spit out a robust series of steps for every single thing that we can do, what we do in the business, which becomes my operating manual, my Bible, the thing that I can train new people on easily, the thing that I can hold my people accountable to. The thing that ultimately lets us review, is our engine as efficient as it could be? Could we be doing the same job faster, better, with quality, with less time? So it's to your point, and something that we've been doing, documenting things. This is literally stuff that we've been working on. I was working on it last week, and we were working on it the week before.
Oh, that's great. Can I ask a question? Because I'm loving all this stuff that you guys are talking about. Is there any specific? Is it not just ChatGPT? Is there any other AI tools that you guys are using to generate these stuff? Because I just find, maybe I'm just, to steal your word, Michael, an idiot. That I find that the ChatGPT sometimes, or maybe I'm not asking the right prompts. But is there any other tools within that IE space that you guys are using for this sort of stuff?
Sorry,
yeah, you go. It's all good.
So I use a platform called Chat LLM, and it's got ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini Pro, all inside for $10 US a month. It's insane. I also use Notebook Gemini, because I'm a Google Suite subscriber, and I get that, and it's got Pro and a few other things. I use Notebook LM, which is the Google product. That's insane. You can drop documents in there. It'll create a podcast based on, so I've got briefing notes, or I've got an ebook or something like that. I drop it in there and it creates a 10-minute podcast on the topic. And then I can use that transcript, or I've actually put it on my YouTube site. I don't have a lot on it, so don't go there. But you can create that. And I use Perplexity, the free version, as my search engine, because it's just like Google. But it's got the AI function in it. So I'll drop all of those links in the chat so that you can get those.
Thank you.
And actually, Garda, just to Steve's point, and to the question that you asked, if you are using ChatGPT, you can create your own GPT within ChatGPT, and you can give it all of the background of what does your business do, why are we here, what is our MO, all of that stuff, and you can save it so that when you start a new chat, you don't have to give it all the background again and again and again and again. You just go in and you start a chat using that GPT rather than the generic chat GPT. And when you ask it a question, it understands all of the context. So you don't have to try and give it context every single time, which is incredibly painful. And it makes a huge difference, massive difference. I'm not saying ChatGPT is the only way. There are hundreds of tools, and what Steve suggested, the LLM product is fantastic and well worth it. But within every one of those, you generally have an opportunity to give it that a little bit of extra context in the background, so you don't have to provide it every time.
The one thing that I will say, to add to what Greg is saying, Gada, is that I think I'm a firm believer that if you are on one particular platform, be it Microsoft or Google or whatever it may be, try and stick within that, because the thing is that regardless of which platform it is, and I'm a Google person as well, so and I know Michael's on Microsoft, so I inevitably have to use both, right? But the thing is that the more you use the system, the more you use something that your business is using, the more AI is going to be embedded into all aspects of that particular system, and it's going to actually learn from you regardless. So take emails, for example. AI can read every single frigging email that's in your email inbox at this present moment, going back to however far back your inbox goes. And that's scary, because I know I can't remember stuff from, I was going to swear, but stuff from last week, let alone 10 years ago. But there lies the power of just making sure that you use everything in the one place. But occasionally you might want to challenge it by using some external systems like what Steve has, to say, okay, look, this is what this Copilot or Google, Notebook LM or whatever it's coming up with. How does this sound? And sometimes you've got to rip it apart. Get someone to get AI to actually rip it apart to see as to where or not. And I know Michael in particular, he tells me about how he has conversations with his chat GPT that goes into the deep rabbit holes, and I went, oh my goodness, that's not me, but I'm glad it's him.
And I think there's I know we're way over time, but I think it sort of goes back to Greg's point about the 80-20.
Yeah.
Why do you want to be involved with AI is always my question. Now, I'm involved with it because I believe that AI is going to replace the consulting world, because the majority of the work that I do, at least at the moment, is taking a lot of data, a lot of information, analyzing that, and then regurgitating it back to the business owner and looking for, what levers are we going to pull. An AI agent will be able to take all of that information, analyze it, and based on the questions that I ask it, it'll be able to come back to me within seconds with a strategy. So that's why I'm doing it, because there's an opportunity for me to replace me with a tool like that. Someone who's running a business, you need to be aware of AI, and you need to understand what it's capable of doing. But should you be doing it?
I hear you on that.
That's the question. So maybe hiring somebody or outsourcing that to somebody with the brief, right? So not knowing about AI, you get conned by gurus, right? But if you know enough about it so that when someone says what AI will do, you go, no, that's rubbish, right? It won't do that. So that you can, your bullshit antennas are up, right? But there are now, I think it's hilarious that there are thousands of gurus in AI popping up. When to not buy a stock is when the taxi driver is telling you to buy that stock. When the bullshit meters are out, when every second YouTube video and Instagram video is someone who's telling you how they're the guru of AI, right? So just this is the cynic in me, right?
That makes sense. I suppose it comes back to you guys' points about the importance of mentoring and coaching, right? Because I was project directing and project managing, and so the things you talk about, Kaizen, Six Sigma, the 7 Whys, all that sort of stuff, very familiar with that. My biggest challenge, and I wonder if other business owners feel the same, is I'm finding it really hard to apply it to my own business because I'm not objective. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's my baby. I find it really hard to, the things like, even like I know, even when I generate like processes, there's some processes, obviously being in food, it's legal law. Like there's certain things you just don't mess with, right? In terms of how you label your products, how you fill them, your sanitary standards, all that sort of stuff. That's fine. But I'm notorious for creating a process and then I'm the one that doesn't follow it. And do you get what I'm saying? It's simply because I am the owner, and that's something that's a bit. I suppose, what's your advice on trying to break those sort of habits and maintaining that sense of accountability? And sorry, I know we're really over time, so I am sorry.
Let me take that, and I can tell you that, Garda, you're not alone. A lot of business owners are in the same position, and it's that whole old saying, the plumber with the worst plumbing. I come from financial planning, so I inevitably see a lot of financial planners who are not really good in terms of their own financial planning either. So firstly, you're not alone. The second thing is that's why there is the ability for you to engage someone who is once removed or not embedded in your business to help you be accountable. Because when human nature, we are we are not very accountable to ourselves. It's very hard to do that. Okay. When we make ourselves accountable to someone else and we know we have to front up, it's the difference between going to a gym and having a PT there that that you're accountable to, or going to the gym and just trying a few different things and then walking out thinking that you've actually had a good workout session.
Yeah.
So
I've done that too.
Yeah. So those are the things that you need to actually think through. How and when do you actually engage someone external? How do you actually make sure that that's a good relationship that's going to be beneficial for you, for your business, for your team? So those are 3 different things. Those are the things that Michael and I can actually have a chat to you about. More than happy to do that.
I would add onto that. So there's a difference between coaching, mentoring, consulting,
Training,
all of those things. I think the advice that and this may seem strange coming from someone who's a business advisor, but I always encourage my clients to go and find somebody from their industry who's been doing what they've been doing for longer than they've been doing it, and approach them and ask them if they would be their mentor. Now, this is not a financial exchange, right? And it might take you some time to actually find the right person. It might be in an industry event, or it might be at a, so that you've actually found them and you've approached them. And most people are quite generous with their time because they don't want you to fail, right? And they may, maybe they see it as a strategic advantage. But I've always had, the mistakes I've made have usually been because I don't know what's down the pathway. And had I asked somebody who had already tread down that pathway, I would have learned a lot more, a lot quicker, right? And so that would be have the advisors there to help you with the functional work and all of the things that you need. It's not that it's exclusive of that, but someone who doesn't have a hammer to solve the problem that you have, which is a nail, I think is a significant advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Steve.
And then they'll hold you accountable, right? You ask them to hold me accountable for this.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Because I know we have gone a little bit over, but that's okay. It's supposed to be valuable. Because we came in with the objective of really trying to, I came with the objective of going, let's pack a lot into a small space of time. And I was saying that really I want attendees to walk away from this going, how do I increase my business value? How do I cut the owner dependency? How do I avoid common valuation killers that can really hurt my valuation price? How do I reduce a leadership transition and team dependency? And finally, how do I create optionality and strategic freedom? And they have been the topics that we've touched on throughout the call. And I believe we've successfully answered them, at least giving everybody an idea of where to start. Like I said, each one of these questions is its own hour-long presentation. And I suppose if you'd like us to talk about these in more detail, any particular question, by all means, let us know. Flick us through an email. And why this is important is it comes back to what I talked about around, even as business owners, we have to think a little bit like investors. And part of that is looking at even your valuation number, less of a number, but what if you thought about it as more of a KPI? A nice, simple metric that helps you go, in 2025, my business was worth X. If I start to take the actions from today's call, maybe in 2026, my business will be worth Y. Whether you use it or not, it's a good little tool or a good little way to help you get a lot clearer on, hey, this is where I am in my business today, and this is where I want it to be, and these are the things I need to do to get there. And ultimately, within myPath Wealth, you have the strongest and best chance of doing it because we can connect you with guys like Steve, guys like Greg, guys like Ivan, who can work intimately with businesses to help drive that growth and create that optionality and freedom. Whether you choose to sell or not, imagine getting to a stage where you're getting paid to not work. That's the dream, right? I can just rock up, whether I do a bit of work or don't do a bit of work, I'm still going to get paid. I'm sure that that's what every one of us wants in our business. We don't want to have to show up, but we love what we do. But imagine being in a position where it didn't matter whether I woke up today and did it, I still got paid. And with that said, I think that's enough. I think we've created a lot of potential overwhelm. There's a lot of stuff we've covered off today. Anyone have any final comments or thoughts before we end it?
No, I just wanted to thank the other two gentlemen for their time. I know we've gone over. So thank you, Steve, once again. You and I have known each other for a long time. Thanks, Greg. All three of us are great golfers. We've got to get Michael onto the golf course at some stage, I think.
Yeah, you can get me on there, but you were just going to laugh at me the whole time.
Anyway, so let's wrap up. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a
Appreciate
great
your time.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Anna, for
Greg.
contributing
Thank you,
as well.
Steve. It was great to have you
Thanks,
guys.
Okay. Bye for now.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Bye.